Where does the African continent fit in the evolution of the 21st century? What role do Africans have to play in ensuring economic prosperity and country growth? These are some of the questions at the forefront of efforts by the African Capacity Building Foundation. They have been in existence for 20 years this year. The African continent today, like the sun slowly rising into the light, a light that will allow the continent to prosper and be free. Energy and passion, the same forces that drive the African Capacity Building Foundation. It all started in 1991, and this year, ACBF celebrates its 20-year anniversary with friends, donors, board members, ministers, prime ministers, and heads of state.
More than 22 years ago, a few African leaders, the donor community, were struggling to find a future for Africa because the development of Africa after independence had not gone as well as it could. And thus was born this issue of capacity.
A collaboration of thoughts and ideas from Africans, donors, and 3 sponsoring agencies, the African Development Bank, the UNDP, and the World Bank. This led to the formation of the ACBF to ensure that capacity building through policy analysis and development management was driven from Africa's soil. Rwanda, one of the first recipients of ACBF support during the 90s, hosted the celebrations in Kigali.
20 years ago, the ACBF was established to respond, as we have already been told, to Africa's acute capacity needs and development ambitions by developing indigenous human capital and institutions. Arguably, 2 decades after its birth, the mandate of the SBF to help African nations develop their capacities is more important than ever.
The theme for the conference was "The future of Africa is now, the critical role of capacity development." And the ACBF's approach has been multi-pronged, according to Dr. Freni Lotia, ACBF's Executive Secretary.
When ACBF was born, the idea was that country ownership would be the key driver that makes successful capacity development on the continent. Country ownership is strongly there, as you've seen by the presence, high-level presence at this meeting. Your Excellencies also from the contributions, financial contributions, even in difficult times, and also from the strength of the ideas that are brought to the table here in terms of what can be done for capacity development. But the second expectation was that ACBF would help better coordinate activities of all stakeholders in capacity development. That is a challenge. The Foundation hasn't done as well in that area, but our hope is that going forward, we will be doing much better there because the number of players have increased, and we hope that this opportunity to think through how we do well in the coming years would help us move even further ahead. And finally, the idea was that Africans, whether on the continent or in the diaspora, would be brought together so that we can better utilize the capacity that already exists.
And those achievements are evidenced in the think tanks, policy units, and projects that are prospering across the African continent.
As far back as 2003, that's when we got on board ACBF support, was to look broadly at capacity development, not only in relation to governments and state institutions or economic policy analysis and so on, but looked at extending capacity building to civil society institutions and, in this matter, think tanks. But they wanted us to build a capacity, because that was our proposal, that would enable citizens engage in the governance process, in policy dialogue, and build their capacity in such a way that they are able to intervene in situations where democratic dialogue will take us out of conflicts.
There is not one developmental sector in Mali, the private sector, civil society or public administration, which does not benefit from the strengthening of capacities at CIRCAP. In all activity sectors, we lead efforts for the strengthening of capacities. Actions of capacity strengthening are not started haphazardly. These actions do not correspond to desires for capacity strengthening, but really to the needs that are required.
The ACBF came in at a time when they really capacitated us, as their name says. They were able to give us scholarships, 40 scholarships for those poor students. A woman with 4 children, a woman who's single, and some men as well who also missed out, because there are some men who missed out. But we take about 15% of our student population, so that we really capacitate the mostly disadvantaged women that we have in Africa.
When we say that one must get out of poverty, one recognizes that an important lever is the strengthening of human capacity. It is really an important lever for the development of a country. This is why I think that ACBF has its place, and it is important to have partners, investors and donors like ACBF.
ACBF becomes important because of the need to link with the other think tanks in Africa, not only within EAC, but beyond EAC, SADC and COMESA, so that as an economy, Tanzania can position itself to become competitive in the region, and we need that understanding on what's happening continent-wise, and of course beyond the continent, knowing the role of emerging economies like Brazil, China and India. So for us, studies on regional integration and international trade are critical. So the funding and support from ACBF becomes more important now than ever.
The Kigali conference targeted several important issues that deal with capacity building in Africa. These included leadership capacity, developing capacity for policy formulation, rebuilding after conflict, and looking beyond 2015 and the Millennium Development Goals. ACBF's flagship publication, the African Capacity Indicators Report, was also launched at the celebrations. This document is important in aiding policymakers to better plan, manage, implement, and account for results in policies and programs. All ACBF programs and projects were represented at the celebrations. The big question for ACBF now is, what should capacity building look like in the future, and who takes responsibility for planning and implementation?
Every country on this planet Earth has been poor at some point. Some were very poor recently, as recent as 20, 30 years ago. They were classified as low-income countries. Now, they have reached where they are today, not by following the same path. They followed different routes, from Indonesia to China to Brazil to India to Turkey and many more. And I think therefore, for us in Africa, we are 53 countries. Each of us, depending upon your initial conditions, your relative capacities, have to chart out your own path. That is, for me, critical.
I want to talk to this issue of mindset transformation. Because if you look at where we're coming from, a traditional society, and now we are in a pre-industrial society. How do you transit from here to an industrial society? Of course, we talk about attracting investment into the country. But the basic raw material are your own people. How do you change the people's mindset? For example, once you train the people, they have the skills. How do you make them creative? How do you develop the entrepreneurship spirit among the people?
Certainly we've started from a very low base, almost on everything, including individual or human capacity, institutional capacity. But at the same time, we've said, as we invest in our people to increase this capacity, we also expect from them that they are thinking beyond this capacity that they have developed to how that translates into the transformation of our society, how it takes everybody, and by all of us working together and each making their own contribution, we see the whole nation move forward from one level to another.
Before we say what we are doing wrong, we need to learn the lessons from the few things we've done right, and then say, how can we continue on that path?
After the two-day high-level conference, there was a general consensus on the guiding principles to inform future capacity-building programs across Africa. The Kigali Resolution was adopted.
You have to have priorities that have impact on human capacity. So we're dealing with human beings, so the heart has to play a role in determining the outcomes for human beings, whether it's on climate change effects, health constraints, access to services, their ability to treat diseases. All of those touch the human in a very personal way, and the capacities required to do that are critical. But in order for that to move to the next level, I think it really requires engaging of the mind.
Mindset is a word that seems to have found much gravitas. With all the stakeholders working with ACBF during the anniversary celebrations, the right mindset with the right capacity building initiatives for every country's needs.